You hear me?
Yes, is that you, Bill?
No, it's me, Justin. Bill and I both have been quarantined. I've actually tested positive. Bill's not feeling well, so I doubt that he'll be calling in today.
Okay. That's fine. So, okay,
I think there's no other option.
Right, absolutely.
Hey, Mike, this is Linda Lett.
Yes.
I know in our last regarding the document that either Bill or Justin was going to be providing to council for review in this meeting, I had not received anything. I didn't know if that was something that was actually delivered to some and not all.
Well, you broke up there for a second, Linda, but I emailed that to you today. I sent it to the other members of the Rules and Courts Committee today. Actually, what I did was I forwarded Bill's original email that had the document attached. So you may find it as an email from me, which is ward3@massillon.ohio.gov.
Well, I'm looking right at my email right now, and I have nothing. So I'm not sure what email that you used.
I'm not
I got
sure.
it, Mike.
I saw Megan nodding her head that she received it.
Mr. Gregg, I did not either, Hearn Kane.
Okay, well, guess one out of three is not good.
They're both on the email too, so that's odd. It said 11/27, and I see that you sent it to me, Linda, and Ted. I'm looking at it right now, so that's odd. Is there a spam in this email? Maybe check there and see if you guys somehow went there.
And I just forwarded that to them just now.
Thank you, Diane.
You're using Ward 6?
Yes, ma'am. It was sent out November 24th.
November 24th?
That's the date it was on the email from the law department.
So, but Mike, am I understanding you sent that out to me today?
That's right. I forwarded Bill Bartos' 11/24 email. And I did use Ward 6, and for Ted, I used at-large Hearn Kane.
Just seems very odd that I'm looking at everything right here. Okay, let me go back to Justin.
Perhaps I can share it on my screen for everyone to see. Let me see if that would be an option. Find it first.
Mike, I also just forwarded it to them as well to see if maybe my email goes through. So I just sent it as well. So Diane sent it and I sent it. I did Ward 6 and at-large for Ted.
Okay.
At MassillonOhio.gov, correct?
Yep. I'm sharing my screen. I have it up in front of me. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yeah, I have nothing. Ted, are you getting that? Are you getting an email?
I am not.
How about your
open server connection for whatever reason? So I don't know if I don't even know if my email's connected anymore, because the last email I got was November 26th.
How about your WebEx screen? I'm sharing my screen, which has the document on it. So can you see that? Can you see it on your WebEx screen?
Yes, and that's fine. That's good enough for me because I don't want to keep going back and forth.
How about you, Linda?
I can see that it's there. I'm having trouble reading it because it's so small. Let me see if I can enlarge it.
Ted, is yours small as well, your screen, or my document on your screen?
Yes, it's on the top half and I can see on the bottom whoever's talking. So I can see you for half my screen and then the document itself on top. But I think if there isn't a way to make it.
I see that on the left, there's a positive and a negative. I'm pressing the positive and it's making it large enough that I can see it. I can read it.
Good, good. Okay, so Megan, you have it either on your screen and on from the email, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're all on the same page now?
Yep.
All right, so I'll go ahead and open the meeting. I'm not sure what the specific particulars are with running the meeting, but I'll go ahead and open the meeting and just have each of you take a look at the document. These are the rules that Mr. Bartos drafted, the wording for the rules that he drafted. I was hoping to have him on so we could just kind of talk about what's different from the original rules, if anything, and if anybody has any questions that he can answer. But perhaps, Justin, are you familiar enough with this that you can help out in that regard?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, Justin, can you talk about any differences between this version of these rules and what they were previous?
Sure. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but it just goes to, it specifically is talking about the assignments of committees, that there'll be no other business, no other motions prior to the deciding of that. And quite honestly, it's just cleaning up what had existed previously. It still requires the same amount of vote. So whether or not it would have gone with, a preceding motion, or if the original committee selections were not approved, there ultimately would not have been a change. But this essentially just makes sure that first and foremost, that it is the duty of the president to do this prior to any other motions being made.
Okay. Specifically, in Rule 18, standing committee shall consist of a chairperson, vice chairperson, one additional member. That would be 3. Each member of the council shall be responsible for serving as the chairperson of at least one standing committee and sitting on at least 2 other standing committees. Any questions or concerns or comments there? I think this is pretty much the way we've been operating.
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
I wanted to ask, that says chairperson and vice chairperson. We don't have vice chairpersons at this point, do we?
Not recognized that I'm aware of. I see Mr. Lewis, you're on the call. Do you have any comment there? Have we had it in the past?
We have not. This is Linda Littman as well. I'm sorry, forgive me. I didn't know you called on Mr. Lewis.
That's all right. So, Mr. Richard, is this something new, the vice chairperson, or is this just the fact that we weren't operating that way?
That is a new addition that would be assigned by the president. It would essentially be a de facto, if for some reason a quorum could still be established, but the chairperson was not available, then they would serve as that person, and that would also be assigned by the president. And previously, the law also read that no less than 3 people would constitute a committee. I believe that this gives finite circumstances as opposed to, enlarging committees indefinitely.
Right. Right, and I'm in favor of that. I guess I like the vice chairperson situation, like you said. If the chairperson can't be at a meeting, that way you have another person designated to run the meeting. And if both the chairperson and the vice chairperson can't be there, we don't have a quorum, so we can't have the meeting anyway. So,
correct.
I think that works well. Any other questions or concerns, comments?
Mr. Gregg, this is Linda Littman.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask Justin, was there a reason to break apart the rules from Rule 18, 18.1 is what we've had previously to 18.2, 18.3? I realize it's saying and just cleaning up what was originally in there. But I guess I'm asking, is there a reason that we broke them out into 3 different rules? Or 4 different rules, excuse me.
Only for Councilwoman Littman, only for really streamlining and for understanding. No other reason than that. This was clearly the objective was just to remove any prior ambiguity that lied there. So individually, they can be looked upon as individual rules. So sometimes when you get into interpretation of law and you have commas and ands, it's kind of a question about, does one law stand by itself? What was the intent? So it's really no more than the legislative intent to show that these are the principles for which this rule will be, governed by.
May I also ask another question?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. When we are adding a vice chairperson to the committee, it leads me to believe that it is documented as a second in charge kind of like hierarchy. And I'm wondering what duties that vice chairperson position would bring to the committee.
Mr. Richard, any comment?
Sure. Just as I stated earlier, it's kind of like the duties, all the duties of the chairperson remain with the chairperson unless for some reason the chairperson is not there. So the vice chairperson would then just assume those duties of the chairperson for that limited time being.
But you're saying that the president of council will also be appointing a vice chairman or chairperson that would serve in the chairman position should the chairperson not be available to, I guess I'm thinking of presenting legislation. If that would be the person, again, an assigned versus what we are currently doing is that, either of the other participants in that committee can present legislation.
It would not remove any previous power that a council person sitting on a committee would have. It only abdicates the role of the chairperson for that particular time being to have a vice person to be able to control that committee for the limited time that chairperson is unavailable. But it would not take away any previous action or power or luxury that a chairperson sitting on a committee would have. Nor would it make their opinion or vote on something any less than, say, how it is now with a committee person against a chairperson.
In our current rules, it does indicate not less than versus a not more than. And I guess I'm just talking out loud. Do we see a situation where a president of council, again, whether it's this president of council or in the future, would have the liberty to add more than 3 members to any committee? And I guess I'm thinking based on perhaps experience or knowledge of that particular area of business.
My opinion on that, Mrs. Littman, is that the president of council should have already taken that into consideration in establishing the 3-person committee. And I don't see any need or reason to have that president have the ability to expand the number of persons on an individual committee. I like the 3. That way, you have a vote. You have a possible. You have a majority for voting, and you don't have the potential if you have an even number of a split vote from a committee. So I like the way that Mr. Bartos has worded this one, and that we have it at 3, period. Any other questions or comments on that?
Yes, Mr.
Mr. Lewis?
Yeah, sorry, I was having some technical issues. I heard you call on me, but I wasn't able to respond, but I think that's been resolved.
Yes.
I will say my immediate response, because I think I was much like Mr. Hernkane, I did not receive an email with this in it. So this is kind of my first look at this. While I understand the concept of a vice chairperson, my concern is that this could potentially open up a can of worms that will further complicate things in the process of selecting committees. Because now we already wrestle with the whole who's going to chair what committee at the beginning of every new council. Then this is going to add an additional layer of who's going to be a vice chair. And it just further, it won't make the president's job any easier, because now they're going to be wrestling with all right, I got to respect people's wishes, trying to get them in the proper vice chair of the committee that they want. As compared to now, the president will just to try to work on the chairs and then kind of to sort out committees as they fall. So I'm concerned it adds an additional layer that's not really necessary for the amount of times it'll actually be utilized. It seems like it brings more issues potentially than it would be worth.
Mr. Gregg?
Is that Mr. Hernkane?
Yes, Mr. Hernkane. Yes, sir.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
I guess to follow up on both of those comments, if the sole purpose of having a vice chairperson is to run a committee meeting or a portion of a meeting in the stead of the chairperson, should they be absent, haven't we historically had that committee run by the pro tem? In, let's say, work session or?
No, typically the chairperson just asks somebody from that committee to do it.
I think identifying a co or a vice chairperson could become a little tedious as well. I'm not totally opposed to it. I hope we're not arguing over a non-issue if it's, good or bad. I don't know. I guess I'm indifferent to it.
This is Starrett. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, listening to Mr. Lewis and Mr. Hernkane, I think I agree with them. This has never been an issue before. I don't know why change it at this point. It does give the president more of a headache at the beginning of the terms. As Mr. Lewis said, I don't think we've ever had an issue if you're the chairperson and you can't be there, that you just call another committee member and the other committee member will take the load on for that meeting. So it's never been an issue before for any of us, and I don't anticipate it becoming an issue that we need to get a second in charge on every committee. So I think it might not be necessary. It could just say a chairperson and two additional members and leave it at that. And then instead of a vice chairperson, so the president doesn't have to appoint 18 positions rather than 9.
I agree with that. Now that we've talked through it, I think it's going to be a matter of up to the chairperson of the committee to designate or ask a second person to run the committee if they can't be there. And that's going to be part of their obligation, part of their prerogative to determine who they're going to ask. So Mr. Richard, can we have that removed?
Absolutely. It was only added at a suggestion. We looked at, I think, 5 other surrounding councils, and they all had something very similar to that. But certainly, if you don't see a need for it, we can take it right out. It's whatever you guys want.
I think it was a good thought, but I agree. I think it could add an unnecessary layer of complexity to the process. So, yeah, I think just going with chairperson and 2 additional members would be sufficient.
We can certainly amend that.
All right, thank you. Moving along, 18.1, not later than the first regular meeting succeeding the organization of council. In each turn, the president of council shall present an assignment of standing committees for council's consideration. Council shall approve or reject the president of council's assignment of standing committees by a motion duly seconded and with a concurrence of an affirmative majority vote of all members of council. I will ask first of all for comments or questions from the Rules and Courts Committee, and then from other members of council once the Rules and Courts Committee has had an opportunity to speak. So Mrs. Starrett, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. The one concern I have, the main concern I have with this one is it says not later than the first regular meeting, and I know that's what it's been. I would just ask, is there a way we can do this that it states before the first regular meeting that the assignment of standing committees be presented for council's consideration, just so we can see it before the meeting starts? Sometimes we get it, emailed to us the day of or the day before, and then this last time it was just kind of handed to us at the council meeting, and we didn't have a lot of time to talk about it or make considerations of it. I think it's just, we have to have legislation to us prior to the regular meeting. I think it would be easy if we had this, assignment of committees that the president is presenting given to us prior to the first regular meeting. I don't know if we want to put a specific time prior, but it would just be nice if it was prior to the first regular meeting.
Would 1 day prior be sufficient, or I mean, at least 1 day prior, or would it need to be more?
I don't particularly have an opinion on that. I just think it'd be nice. I mean, we get legislation prior to the regular meeting, so why would this be any different? I mean, legislation is required like a week before, but I don't think that's a necessity. A day or so, yeah, I think that would be appropriate.
Okay. Mr. Hernkane, comments?
Well, I would counter and say I would say then if you look at the next rule 18 point, whatever that is too, then if there's an alternative slate posed by another council member, then that should be presented early as well.
He has a point. I mean, that's a good counterpoint that maybe anybody that's wanting to put up a order or an assignment those should be submitted to council prior to.
Because I think the spirit of 18.2 is to honor the tradition that the council president submits a slate of committees, which is the way that it's generally been. I guess if they're required to, I see what Mrs. Starrett is saying. If they're required to present it early, then if somebody had another slate that they wanted to present, should the council president slate get vetoed or turned down, then we would have that at the meeting and not early. So I guess that just gets probably a little more in the weeds.
So if we said, or if the legislation stated that all or any proposed assignments as committees be presented at least 1 day prior to the meeting that we'd be voting on, does that make sense?
It's either going to have to be uniform, either they're all submitted on the day of, or they're all submitted prior. I don't know which is going to be easier.
Mr. Richard, any comment there?
Comment. This is for you guys. I'm the baker. I'm going to make the cake. I think everybody brings up valid points. Uniformity in the law is always preferred. So I think by defining it with a specific time period, certainly whatever you guys feel is prudent would probably be best for those trying to interpret the law. So that we have, a drop dead date by when the proposed slate should be circulated, and maybe even to whom and how would also be probably beneficial.
I agree. Yeah, when I'm asking for your comment, it's from a legal standpoint, and because to use your analogy, you're the one who determines the temperature of the oven and how much time you need to prepare the ingredients. So that's why I'm asking for your comment on that, if there's any legal ramifications to the changes that we're suggesting.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Not legal ramifications anyway.
All right, or procedural, anything along those lines. Any more questions, comments from Rules and Courts Committee?
Just
members?
briefly, Ms. Starrett, I like Mr. Hernhane's point. I think he's got a good point that it should be uniform across the board. And I think, any suggestions on council assignments should be submitted prior, if it's from the president or even other council members prior to that first regular meeting, whether it's 24 or 48 hours in advance. That's something I guess I don't really have an opinion on. I just think it should be submitted prior so people can look at it and be prepared in advance, just like we are with legislation requests. I don't have an issue with it across the board. I think that's a good point, Mr. Hernhane.
I agree as well. Any other members of council have a comment or question?
Yes, Mr. Gregg.
Mr. Lewis?
Just a couple complications with the prior to. So while I agree that having the slate presented from the president to council prior to the meeting is of great benefit, because it allows council members to review and consider prior to being on the spot where open debate will begin. Following along that logic and having any alternative proposals also being due prior to. The problem is if we say that the president's must be submitted 24 hours before the meeting, and any alternative proposal must be submitted before 24 hours before the meeting, and the president submits theirs 24 hours exactly, then it voids out the possibility of someone being able to submit an alternative, because the president put it right up against the wall. Not that they, you know what I'm saying? Like there's no way to review and then put another one because you're already past the time frame. So that presents an issue. And it also kind of contradicts Rule 18.3 that says that any regular meeting council may by motion change it. So I mean, for clarity, maybe it is just easier to leave it at not later than the first regular meeting, and then just rely on that maybe you get it earlier than that. Because I think when you start changing that, while I agree with it, it does start to open up other cans.
Well, I mean, either way, you've got a deadline, and that the president could potentially run up against, whether it's one day prior to or the actual meeting. I guess the way I'm looking at it is not that you can, if someone else has an alternate slate of council assignments, they should have those and present those, not necessarily after looking over what the other suggestions are, perhaps, is I guess where I'm going with that. Is that, so if that's the case, where you've put together what you would suggest, and the president puts together what he or she would suggest, and then they all are both submitted at the same time, we all see, as council, all see them at the same time, wouldn't that work?
I mean, in theory, I'm just thinking if somebody would want to have an alternative based off of what they saw from the president. They might not think about having an alternative until they see what the president proposes. And then once they see what the president proposes, they're like, well, no, I think maybe we should go this direction. They won't know that until they actually see the proposal.
Right.
And then if you vote it down, you don't have an alternative proposal to consider, because you don't have it allowed because the time frame's already elapsed. But we have 2 minutes. We got to get to the other meeting.
Right. Okay. I guess we're going to have to talk about this some more then, and we'll do this in another Rules and Courts Committee meeting. Real quickly, I just want to mention 18.3. I have a question for Mr. Richard on this. It states regular meeting council may by motion duly seconded with the concurrence of affirmative majority vote all members of council change the membership of any committee of council. Is that changing who's on the committee or the number of committee on the committee?
That's changing the composition, not the number. It would be, actually, I believe it's not been changed from what the rule is right now. I could stand to be corrected there, but I don't believe it's, I believe that's exactly the way it reads right now. And it would be exactly for the situation that we find ourselves in when we have a member that resigns. So
Okay.
in that situation, the next regular meeting, if the composition were to, not the number, but the persons on an individual committee that a previous committee person was on that's no longer, that has since resigned, you could in fact change the composition of that now, because I believe that is the rule as it stands. So
All right.
that I don't believe we messed with.
Okay. All right. So appreciate everybody joining us this evening and giving this some consideration. And obviously, we need to give this some more thought and consideration. We'll talk about this in a future committee meeting, Rules and Course Committee meeting. But at this point, I'm going to go ahead and close this meeting so we can get to the regular work session.
Mr.
Mrs.
Gregg,
Lippman?
may I ask you just a quick question? Were there any?
We cannot, we have to go. We have to shut this down and open up the next. You can ask during the committee meetings at the 6:30
Yeah.
time.
Right. That's during that meeting. Thank you.
Jason Popiel. Community Development Director Samantha Walters. Economic Development Director Dave Maley. Parks and Rec Director Steve Pedro. Police Chief Keith Mosier.
I'm here.
Fire Chief Tom Bergasser. Income Tax Budget Director Lori Katagides-Boron.
Present.
Let's see, is there any administration that I did not mention? Council President Claudette Eisnick.
Present.
Again, is there any administration that I did not mention?
Dave Maley, I'm here. Frank
Okay.
Silla's here.
Is that Frank Silla?
Yes,
Thank you.
David Maley.
I mean, that's it, Ed.
All right, Ms. Rowland, do you want to check for council members?
Yes, sir. Kramer,
Present.
Greg,
Present.
Kern Kane. He's there, I see him. Lewis,
Yep.
Littman,
Yes.
Okay.
Lombardi,
Here.
Starrett,
Here.
and Barrett.
Jim Thurrett's having some technical difficulties getting on tonight.
Okay.
Diane, did you say Hearn Kane?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I'm here.
Okay. So far, I have 7 present.
Ms. Halter is not with you then, Ms. Rowland?
No, sir, she is not.
All right. Well, then I believe, according to the letter, then tonight was the last night of Ms. Halter. I believe her resignation is effective this evening. Is that correct, Ms. Rowland?
That is correct.
Okay. And then just to, I guess, make sure we're all on the same page, I believe starting tomorrow, from my understanding, her party affiliation, its headquarters has 45 days to fill that seat. So, yes, Ms. Sterrett?
Don't we usually do a resolution commending them for council members for service when they either resign or retire? So maybe something we can work on for next meeting or something.
Yeah, I think we could probably, maybe, Diane, do you think you could have that ready for our next work session? And then the last meeting of the year, we can try to pass that.
Right. I was going to say that has to go through committee of the whole with via a request for legislation.
Yeah, so good idea. Thank you, Ms.
We'll
Sterrett.
take care of it.
Other than that, unless anyone has a concern, I would like to go ahead and again start with the budget discussion from the members that are here with us this evening. That way, if they have other things that they have to attend to, such as their family or whatnot, they can dismiss themselves. Does anyone have an objection to that? Ms. Katagidis-Boron?
Good evening, everybody. Tonight we have Frank Siller with us from Building. And Chief Moser, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm on.
And we have Chief Moser from Police. So they are going to speak a little bit about what's happened in 20 and what they look forward to in 21. You also received a hard copy of some of their accomplishments in the past week or two on these two. Streets was going to be with us tonight, but they were unable to. They had a personal conflict, and Lee was not able to do it. Let's start with Frank.
Hello.
Go ahead and share, Frank.
Okay, as far as the building department goes, 2020 was extremely busy year with the construction industry. Construction didn't slow down with the COVID-19 at all. 2020, we had like 1,421 permits so far this year. The total value of construction's been about 40 million, almost 41 million. As far as the permit breakdown, building permits 712, electrical permits 244, plumbing permits 128, heating permits about 329, low voltage permits about 8. So far this year we've had 62 new housing starts, and I looked, we've had 7 this month so far. I believe that takes us up to 69 new houses in the city so far this year. Compared to last year, we had less than 40. And
You take your phone now.
I expect this to continue for 2021. We have a big Ryan Home housing allotment on the west side out by Tuslaw High School, and there's still several lots, and they just keep going out there.
Hold on 1 second, please, Mr. Silla.
Yes.
I just want to remind everyone, you are not muted, so please do not have conversations in the background. It disrupts us from being able to hear what Mr. Silla is saying. Go ahead, Mr. Silla.
Okay, that was our permit breakdown, and I give you the residential breakdown with so far 6970 new houses this year so far. As far as the industrial commercial jobs, we've had a busy year there too. I'll run through them real quick here. It'll just take a second. You know, RG Drag, they had a big remodel this summer. Walmart, they're always doing something out there. They just redid the restrooms, the Eagles, Oberlin, Simon's Feed. They put up 2 silos this past year. Discount Tire, they're doing an addition. Duncan Plaza, Fiber Core, they're putting up a maintenance building. Fresh Mart, you know, they just finished up with that new line they put in on the south side. Now they're putting a big warehouse on the north side. We got the municipal building. We're doing the ADA. That RD storage units on Ventura. Shears is doing a big addition on the south end. It's like $4 million. Gojo did a lunchroom and offices. That's just finishing up. Mayflower Apartments, they did a big remodel, and R2 Land Holding, that big building right off Millennium. So we had a busy year this year in the building department. And if anybody's got any questions for me, I'm open to questions.
Does anyone have questions for the building department? Ms. Lippman?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Could he remind us how many employees that we currently have in our building department? And then my second question is going to be, why is there about a $20,000 increase in the insurance line of the 2021 budget for the building department?
Well, as far as the building department goes, there's myself and Jeff Retberg. Jeff can do building, plumbing, and heating, and I can do building, heating, and electric. So between the two of us, we got everything covered. And then there's we have 2 permit techs in the office, Tracy Ward and Tanya Stuck. And then in the other building, we have 3 code enforcement officers, Jim Johnson, Flex Stoker, and Trevor Griffith. Okay, as far as your second question goes, as far as the insurance goes, our budget was basically the same as it was the previous year. The only thing that we asked for a little bit more was in the services and contracts because of the NIP program. We were cutting more grass this year than we did last year.
Frank, I can also help with that. The other question that Mrs. Lippman asked for, they had a change in the coverage on our hospitalization. Somebody went to the family plan, which is a much larger cost than no plan or an individual plan. So that is what caused the increase in that line item.
Thank you, Lori.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Mr. Silla. We appreciate you taking the time to share with us this evening.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Ms. Katagides-Boren, whoever you want next.
That will be Chief Moser. Chief Moser, would...
Yes, I'll start out with the hiring for this current year. We did encounter some difficulties because of the pandemic with being able to get our backgrounds done and some other testing completed. We were able to hire 2 officers earlier in the year. They've successfully completed their field training and are on solo patrol at this time. And we've hired 2 more just today. In fact, that puts our number at 46 for the department. We still have an open civil service test, and we are drawing on the next list of eligible candidates. We do anticipate some difficulties in the future with hiring. We've noticed somewhat of a lack of interest. I know some of the police academies are having trouble filling the slots available. It's just kind of with the way things are going in society, we're seeing a downturn in interest in policing, but we will continue recruiting as we have in the past to try to get those numbers up as much as possible. We were also able to add an additional school resource officer this year, bringing our number up to 3. And they all have the required training, and we were able to get a 4th officer the training as a school resource officer in case one of the other officers would be off. For instance, one of our officers is going to be off. His wife is having a child, so he's going to be off for several weeks. So we have a trained officer that will be able to fill in for him. We've improved some of the security at the police department. Biggest thing is the gate to the back parking lot. We are getting that fixed, up and running. It should be ready this week or next week. They still got a little work to do on it, but that's getting done. Cruiser-wise, we've ordered a total of 4 cruisers. 2 are here. 1 is we're waiting on, and the 4th will be for the additional canine that we're bringing on. We are bringing on 2 new canines for the department. 1 is basically ready right now. We are going to name the canine officer, and he'll begin the training here shortly. And the other one should be ready after the first of the year, and we'll do the same thing, assign a canine handler and get them the required training. We're close to having an online reporting solution available. It'll probably be after the first of the year. We're looking at some of the COVID, the CARES Act funding for that, but we've done a lot of the research on it, and we're basically ready to go at any point that we need to for that. We've utilized the radar recorder significantly more this year to try to identify places that we need increased traffic enforcement. And we're in the process, if we haven't already, of ordering an additional radar recorder to give us a little more resources for that. We've replaced 23 desktop computers and 4 tablets. This year, they were all running Windows 7, which is no longer being supported, so they needed to be replaced. We've teamed up with Stark County Sheriff's Office, Jackson Township, and Canal Fulton in researching a records management system. Our current records management system is outdated, and that is something which I'll talk about here shortly, which will be probably the biggest thing for 2021 that we're going to be looking at. We participated in several OVI checkpoints, other traffic enforcement and impaired driving programs. We do have body cameras and in-car video available to all officers. That was finished up this year. And our training was kind of cut short due to the pandemic, but we did get some, in addition to the school resource officer training, some crisis intervention training, which just 2 weeks ago, we had a group of 4 of our officers complete that and graduate. Other than that, we have been using the mobile CAD, which is a software that we have in the cruisers, which we can use to assist. Our officers can do a lot of the work that dispatch does for them over the radio. They can do themselves in the cars. So those are some of the main things that we did accomplish in this year so far. Like I was saying, probably the biggest thing for next year is the records management system. Currently, the Stark County Sheriff's Office is in negotiations with a couple companies, and what they're trying to do is get a system that will be large enough for several other departments to utilize as well. That way, we are able to share a lot of the information that we have a lot easier and in a much timelier fashion, which will increase officer safety. It will also give us a lot better opportunity to look at statistics, provide reports, and all those kind of things. Because really, the old RMS was not set up very well to do those kind of things, and that will be a very large thing that we're trying to accomplish. It's going to take some time. I know the sheriff wanted to have something in place by the end of June. Might be a little aggressive, but I'd rather have it be a little more aggressive than too lax. But we're going to, give our full effort into getting that accomplished. It's going to provide us with a lot more information, provide you with a lot more information. And that is the biggest thing we're working on.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for the police chief? Ms. Littman.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Chief, I have a question. You've talked about several training that quite a bit of training that our officers have participated in. I'm wondering if, because we have several new officers as well, if we're going to be including animal control training. I know when we had our conversations regarding whether we should be considering an animal control officer or not, the Stark County Dog Warden offered training for any new officers or existing officers that may need somewhat of a refresher course. I'm wondering if that is something that's on your radar for 2021.
It is on the radar. Like I said, this year, the pandemic really cut into our ability to get a lot of training. But yes, that is something that we are going to be looking at.
I do have one more question.
Yes, Ms. Littman.
Chief, you'd mentioned the records management system. Do you have any idea of what we would be looking at as far as since it's a conglomerate of several agencies in that system, do you have any idea of what our part of the cost of that would be?
No, that's why we did not try to include it into the budget at this point, because we really don't know. Like I said, the sheriff is currently in negotiations with two companies to see what the price is going to be for them. And part of the negotiations is going to be what our price would also be to be included in that. So we don't even know what company yet we're going to be looking at. And I haven't gotten anything further on what the potential cost may be.
If we are considering instituting this in 2021 and it's not in our budget, where would we be looking to try to fund our portion of this from?
Well,
unappropriated or?
Probably. I was going to be talking with Lori on that once we had some numbers, so we could try to see where that money could be found.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Chief Moser, you had mentioned that we are up to 46 officers now. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what is our number that we have that you're supposed to be at when able?
Well, the minimum number was set at 44.
Okay, I
we,
thought so.
Yeah, no, the mayor did authorize us to go above that because of the school resource officer positions. So we are at least one short of where we want to be. Now I know the mayor also had, wants somebody with Stark Metro. That would be another position. But we'll get there when we get there.
All right. And then I don't know, I'm trying to go back through everything you discussed. So I'm sorry if I ask a repetitive question. Retirements, are you anticipating anything in 2021?
I'm anticipating one retirement mid-year. There could be more, but that's all that I know at this time.
And so then the sick leave accrual, that should be sufficient?
I believe so.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the sick leave payout, it should have been calculated into the budget.
All right. And then we have the two canines. What do we provide, or what do you anticipate us providing next year as far as support of the animals?
We will provide food, veterinary care. We will also provide a run at the officers' residence for when they're not there with the animal, along with all training and equipment. Basically, we're getting away from the way we used to do it. Now, the dog will be owned by the police department. We will care for it, take care of it.
Okay, and that's would be in your services and contracts?
Yes.
And then will the canine unit vehicles that they use, will they have the quick release doors for the officer with the dog?
Yes.
Okay. And then speaking of the vehicles, how is our overall fleet performing right now? I know we have the vehicle replacement program, but would you say it's at par of what you would like to see?
We are on track with our replacements. Like any vehicle, with as much as they are used, I mean, we have issues with them from time to time, but I would say that we are on track with where we should be as far as the replacements go.
Are we at the point where most vehicles are able to at least get a shift off?
Yes.
Okay. Few years back, our police vehicles didn't get a shift off, which means they pretty much ran 24/7. So the goal was to get to the point where they at least get one shift to rest the vehicle. All right. Anybody else have any questions?
And the vehicles that are being replaced, they're going to the SROs. So we do have a use for them still. So the school resource officers have a marked unit that's still in pretty decent shape.
Good. Good. Ms. Lippman.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Chief, have we considered having health insurance for the canine? I know that it exists now, and I'm not sure that it has been considered for the last canine that we had, but depending upon what the veterinarian bills, shots, etc., could be for a two canine, I'm wondering if it is not a good idea to check into what the cost of the health insurance might be for our canine.
I can check into that. I haven't at this point.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Moser. We appreciate your time this evening.
You're welcome.
Ms. Katagides-Boron.
I just would like to, I don't know, does anybody else have any questions around the budget that they'd like to ask now?
Well, Ed, did you want me to say my budget?
Yeah, Ms. Katagides-Boron, I am going to have Ms. Ferrera also present tonight.
Okay,
So
I apologize. I did not know that she was also going to talk, so I do apologize, Jane.
do you want me to circle back to you for summary statements?
Yes, I would like to just have some summary statements. There was a question asked last week about a debrief on where we're at in income tax year to date, so I would just like to briefly talk about that when we're done here as well.
Absolutely. We have a couple more things, and then we'll circle back to you. Ms. Ferrera?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I just wanted to say that my budget is not even close to being as exciting as the building and the police departments are. I have pretty much of a basic budget. I have 6 employees in the auditor's office. And this year, my budget has been decreased by $51,328.02. A couple of the things that we have done that have been amazing is our audit. As you all know, we had a beautiful audit this year, and we were commended for that. Also, we were successful in getting the police and the fire department on their own electronic pay. And so now everyone in the city is done electronically. There's no paper involved whatsoever, and that goes for purchase orders and everything else. The other thing I want to tell you is most of you know that Debbie Bunk is going to be retiring in 2021. Stephanie Myers is going to be my new Chief Deputy Auditor, and her and Debbie have been working hand in hand since January. I have a new employee, Amy Yamayon. She started in January of this year, and she took the place of Becky Chauvin, who retired. So that's about the biggest update I have. Does anyone have any questions for me?
No, you're right. Yours is easy, especially when it's a reduction.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Richard, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Is there anything you wanted to say regarding your budget?
Sure. I was told that I wouldn't be presenting until 12/9, but it is it's pretty straightforward, like Ms. Ferrera's as well, if you'd like me to go.
Yeah, if you're ready, let's knock it out. Let's make 12/9 easier.
Sure. Basically, the newest thing as far as updates to my office is obviously me. So the only increase in our request is the statutory base salary of my position. And so the increase does reflect that. Other than that, I know that we were down as far as some criminal and traffic trial numbers, but we have significantly gone back, and we'll probably end the year close to where we ended it last year. There has been an increase in certain misdemeanor violent crimes, such as domestic violence, that we have a grant that provides for the majority of our domestic violence division of our office, but I've actually had to step in because the numbers have been so high. So I've actually done some of those myself recently. Starting with my beginning of the office a couple of years ago, it was something that former law director Skaz and I wanted to do, was unify all of the southern and southwest jurisdictions where they have original jurisdiction in our municipal court, but we didn't prosecute their cases. And we were able to go out and get them, and they didn't raise our caseload significantly, but we were able to bring in money. And I'm happy to report that the last 2 remaining jurisdictions, I was able to go out and secure those. Those are Wilmot and Beach City, and their councils have voted to go with us for next year, pending, of course, the approval from our council, which will be in front of you in the next couple of weeks. And that will bring in an additional, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's again, more revenue. I think totaling with the previous jurisdictions that we've brought in is approximately $70,000 a year for the city that goes into the general fund, all from doing just the normal cases that we're doing. So that should offset any increase. That's basically it.
Mr. Richard, when you say the statutory salary, that's the salary that City Council approved for making your position full-time, correct?
That is correct.
Any other questions for the law department?
Mr. Lewis, this is Linda Littman. I don't have a question for the law department, but I do have one for Ms. Ferrero, if she's still on the line.
I'm here.
Go ahead.
You'd mentioned that your budget is down over $51,000, and I'm not sure I caught as to what was the cause of the decrease in your budget.
Well, it comes from the salary lines and also the benefit lines, and plus my supplies and materials and postage is down $5,000.
So we're not eliminating a position. We are just readjusting salaries. Is that correct?
No. Well, Debbie's going to be leaving, so I adjusted her salary accordingly.
And then Stephanie's will be adjusted accordingly as well, correct?
That's right.
Okay. Thank you, Jane.
Sure.
All right, I want to read a statement from an email that I received today from the courts. If I can find it here, hold on a second. Judge Elam writes, the Mass Municipal Court submitted its 2021 city budget to the City Council, Auditor Ferrero, and the administration pursuant to the Budget Director's guidance as to employee compensation, medical, and health benefits. Basically, in a conversation with Judge Elam, he had showed that his increases in his budget are related to just whatever raises there may be given to people, whether that be a step raise or whatnot, and insurance costs. He also stated the municipal court has continued operations throughout the COVID-19 pandemic without any closures. The court has been supported by the Ohio Supreme Court orders covering court operations, video technology grants, and health and safety procedures. The municipal court implemented health and safety procedures, purchased equipment, and restricted access to the buildings and courtrooms. Through CARES Act funding and Auditor Ferrero and her staff, the court and city have been reimbursed for safety figures and equipment, cleaning and masking. Court security has been increased to enforce health regulations covering COVID-19 pandemic and additional security rounds throughout the municipal building. Judge Victor and him are available for any questions you may have. They could make an appearance at a future council meeting if that is what we desired, but we did want to get a statement in front of you. I do want to make sure that we discuss the relationship briefly of the courts with City Council and the budget. So because the court is a separate branch of government, they are the judicial branch, they are able to make their budgetary needs known to us. And we are, I don't know how to say it, Ms. Derrick, correct me if I'm speaking incorrectly. We are somewhat obligated to fulfill the request of the court unless it is found to be out of line with what is reasonable. In order to
is the words they use. If they're abusing their discretion in choosing their budgetary amounts, then it could be challenged. Beyond that, we are expected to make sure that we fund the court system and the judicial system so it runs smoothly. Fair?
Yes. Yes. And a challenge essentially means we would be taking the court to court, challenging the request. So with this being a very little of an increase, typically, council doesn't raise too much of a fuss. But I did want to explain that to everyone in case they do have any questions. But like I said, you can always call the court, or you can let me know, and I can try to see if we can get one of the judges in on the 9th. All right. Outside of that, this is coming up for third reading. I will be making a request to table it until the 21st of December. That way we have at least one more work session to discuss and review. And then as long as all goes well, we would be requesting a vote on the 21st. This must be passed prior to the end of the year, so that we can start functioning on the 1st of January. Again, I will state, if there's anything in this budget that is not covered and you would like to see occur in 2021, we do have options. You do have the ability to look over the entire budget and attempt to make adjustments to find the money if that is something you so choose. I know Lori Kratagides-Born right now is having a heart attack, as long as Jane Ferrero, but it is the truth. We do have the legislative authority to do that if we so choose. But sometimes the best method would be to utilize any carryover we have to address those concerns, if that is something that means something to you. With that said, Ms. Kratagides-Born, can you go ahead and give us the summaries that we had already briefly mentioned?
The summaries on the income tax, is that what we're talking about, Mr. Lewis?
Well, if you have any summary of the budget, you can say so now, and then go ahead and transition right into tax revenues for 2020 amidst the pandemic.
Okay. I just briefly, as what we discussed, each department that spoke tonight did a great job on talking about their budget. There is little to no change in the particular budgets. Just a couple things that, as you look through them, that you might notice is in the building department, they did have an increase in their services and contracts. That is for mowing of our NIP lots. We have more NIP lots now than we did before, and they need to be mowed so that we can keep our city looking good. So we did increase that. That is the one increase other than the hospitalization in the building department. So as you look through this after tonight, if you saw that, I just wanted to point that out to you. Also in the law department, if you notice, there are some increases in the staff. They have quite a few step increases coming through this year, so those are something that we are obligated to give. So that is where we're standing with that. And I think that Chief Moser pretty well covered all of his budget categories. So that would be my summary for tonight. If anybody looks over the budget within the next couple weeks or the couple days and you have any questions, please feel free to email me or call me. I will be available to answer any questions that you have. And yes, I did have a heart attack.
All right, thank you.
Sure. I also just want to talk a little bit about, there were some questions about reviewing where we're at on the income tax side of the house. So I just want to make sure that I did send a report out on my monthly report on 11/10. I did send that to all the council members. That report is also included in the mayor's report on a monthly basis, and I do believe Diane gets it twice, once from me and once from Linda when she sends the monthly report. So if you have not received that report, please get a hold of myself, because I do have a email list for council or Diane, and we can get you a copy of that. Just a brief summary of where we stood at the end of October, since it's almost time to get that report out for November. For the month of October 2020, we were down about 4% from 2019. It's about $67,700 rounded up. So we were down about 4%, and we were also down about 4% year to date. So we had a decrease of $624,364 year to date. If you look at as you review the report, the majority of our income tax collection is and has always been the withholding. That's about 73%. Individual income tax is 15% of what we collected in October, and net profit is 12%. So that's, withholding usually it averages about 70 to 73%. So we're holding strong on that. The monthly income for the last 10 months is around 1,707,997 and some odd cents. That is down from 19 and 18, so not down quite as much as we had anticipated, but it is down. And our refunds are up year to date, and that is basically due to two very large business refunds that we needed to give. What normally happens is businesses carry over. They have a carryover, so they always have money there for their taxes. We did have two businesses that asked to have that money refunded to them, which we are obligated to do, and that is all but about $5,000 of the difference from last year to this year. So that is what that is. Collections, as collections go, we should be about 83.88% through October. The general fund was about at 79.21%. Then we have a lot of different funds. The street fund, which is the 1201, the 1235, which is Parks and Rec. 1306 is bond for Parks and Rec. We have the 1401, which is capital improvement, and also 1433, which is Parks and Rec as well. As I said, the general fund, the 1100, is at 79.21% in collection. The streets are at 77.64, and the other categories are at 74.53. All these numbers come off of reports that are either driven through the municipal income tax solutions that we use, which we call MITS, or through the auditor's VIP reporting system. So these are systems that track everything throughout the city, and that's what these come from. So right now we're at about 4% down. I anticipate after November that we'll probably stay around 4% down. I can't give you any concrete numbers until the next couple days for November. We'll be closing out November, but I do believe we will still stay around that 4%. So that is a brief summary of where we stand. Income tax through October of 2020, and in the next probably 7 to 10 days, you'll be receiving a new report from income tax for the November numbers. I've continued to email those out to council. The mayor's report usually comes out about the 15th of the month, but due to the pandemic and this being a very different year, I've tried to email that out to you all at an earlier date, just so you kind of know where we stand from the collection basis. So that is my summary on the income tax side. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask.
Ms. Lippman?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Lori, are you indicating that even through year end, you would anticipate us to be only down 4% through the year 2020?
Now, this is my best guesstimation, so you never know what might happen in a month. I would say right now I would anticipate 4 to 5% maybe. Collections seem in November to be on par for what they were in 2019, so that's a good sign. But with the pandemic and the holiday and everything in December, that's going to be an uncertain time. So I would say 4 or 5%. That would be my best guesstimation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Ms. Katagides-Boren, this is just on income tax. So in other areas, if there is, such as the COVID payments that we've received through CARES Act, if there's enterprise funds that maybe have done exceptionally well, or if we have cut costs in other areas, we could actually see ourselves to the positive, even though our income tax collections were down 4 or 5%, correct?
It would depend. Yes, we do collect on different categories. That would be something we work with the auditor for to get those exact numbers. But This is, the general fund is basically generated from the income tax piece. There are a few other things that go into that as well, but yes, we're talking about basically the general fund.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you with that. So we will continue this conversation in 2 weeks. Like I said, I'll be making a motion to table at the next work session. At the next work session, we will also have Steve Pedro of Parks and Rec to discuss the Parks and Rec budget. With that said, we can move on to the other business of this evening. President Eisnick, did you have any updates you wanted to share with council this evening?
Thank you. I was disappointed we weren't in council chambers tonight. I guess I thought that was our plan. Mark, is everything going to be ready by a certain date?
It was, we have everything set up. I just have to place the camera, which will be about 15, 20 minutes. Bob Jones is going to assist me with that sometime this week. I was under the impression that we weren't able to get into chambers right away due to other unforeseen circumstances. If I'm wrong in that, then it should be ready this week.
So Ed, are you still under the thought that you'd like it to be at a committee meeting rather than a council meeting?
Well, this is a two-part answer. I guess the first part is I think it makes more sense to do it at a work session, just to be, safe. The second part of that answer is when we started to go down this road over the summer, it was a much different environment than we're currently in. I mean, Stark County is one indicator away from going purple. And I have to ask this council, is it really a wise move to have us all come back into chambers if the county goes purple and the message being sent out from the state and the health departments is to stay home and be cautious? And we would actually be making a move in the opposite direction.
Anyone on council have any comments on that or thoughts?
Yes, I do. This is Jim Theriot.
Go ahead, Jim.
My family and I have decided we won't be doing any kind of public appearances. So I won't be there until at least the beginning of the year.
Okay. Megan?
I would probably agree with Mr. Lewis and Mr. Theriot. I think at this point, with the numbers being so high, I think we all have a health and safety risk by being in a room together, and say one council member becomes symptomatic within a day of having a meeting. Does that mean all council members have to quarantine and all council members are sick? I don't really know how the quarantine rules are, but we could be wiping out all city business just by all of us being in the same room with the numbers so high. So I think maybe health and safety wise, it might be smarter for us to continue as is until things calm down a bit, and maybe just play it week by week or every couple weeks, maybe an update, see how the numbers are and go from there.
I understand your thoughts on that. However, if all got quarantined, we'd be doing exactly what we're doing right now. Anyone else have any thoughts on it? I'll go with the flow. I don't really care.
This is Mr. Hernkane. I'll make a comment. I agree with the indicators, and we have to see what the governor's going to do with Stark County on Thursday. I think Mr. Lewis is right. We're probably heading into the purple real quick. I wouldn't be opposed to going remote for the remainder of the year, and then maybe first of the year, maybe if it is a better situation, maybe there's a compromise. Can we have, when we feel it's safe to go, can we have our regular meetings in chambers, continue to have work sessions remote?
We can do anything we want, and I will go with whatever the majority of you want. I'm not a dictator here. I just want to go with the flow.
Well,
I don't think that idea, Mr. Hernkane.
I mean, I think it's important that we cast votes and have meetings in person. I'm an advocate for that. I also don't want to be seen as somebody that's, just dying to jeopardize people's health. I think it's important for us to meet in person when we feel it is appropriate to do so. Maybe we do this for the rest of the year and look at that first of the year. I mean, maybe we can do these work sessions remote, have meetings. We'll see what the situation looks like, I guess. We just don't know. But maybe we can keep that in mind.
And again, whenever we do go back into council, if you are not comfortable, don't come back in. I mean, honestly, I don't ever want anyone to do anything they're not comfortable with. Anyone else?
Well, I was just going to add, with that said, I would still ask that Mr. Lombardi continue to get that camera set up, because really we could use the remainder of this year to even do some mock runs. We could set it up and launch it, even though it's not really going to have any of us there. Maybe we could
Well,
work out some bugs.
Mr. Lewis, what can happen? First off, once we do this, we still have the ability. We have the ability to do it in a mixed version, or all at home, or all in council. However anybody wants to do it. So if somebody's not is not comfortable coming into the council chambers, they can still remote in just like they do today. Okay, because that's how the public's going to get there. It's just that once we're in chambers, we're all face to face, and we're all on the same camera. We're all in basically the same square on the grid. The other thing is, Diane can actually, once I get this set up this week, she can actually use her podium to conduct the meetings. Okay, so there's a test run, right there, her testing it. And I have no problem going down into chambers too, and sitting in my seat and using the system, and, just as, one person in there, it'll show all, seats, but, from my seat. So you can see that it's working properly and everything. Then when we're ready to go back in, then people can start funneling in as they feel comfortable.
I agree. Councilwoman Littman?
Thank you, Madam President. I do believe that we had a conversation with the law director regarding the update on the new updates on restrictions for in-person meetings. Can I be assured by Mr. Richard that what we are contemplating doing does meet those requirements?
Mr. Richard, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
Councilwoman Littman, yes. As of right now, it's a very fluid situation. So certainly the governor could change that on any given 3 o'clock. So we'll just have to wait and see. But ultimately, what I've been doing, certainly with the issues that I've been having in my office, and I know the court, we defer to Terry Argent for everything. So ultimately, I think prior to any significant change, that we would defer to Ms. Argent and make sure that we're complying with all the safety protocols that are up to date.
Thank you, Mr. Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. Anyone else? Okay, for the foreseeable future, we will continue to do our meetings as we are doing now. If any of you want to go into council, you're more than welcome to. But this seems like a safe format for the present. Thank you.
All right, community development.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I have 2 new pieces of legislation tonight. The first one is an application from the City Planning Commission recommending a rezoning of 2 parcels, 2 lots from Legacy Land Development, and this is on Noble Place Northwest, from multifamily residential to 1-family residential for both lots, to rezone to build single-family homes. Is there anybody from administration that wants to speak on this at this time?
Mr. Dave Maley. Yeah, this was passed at the last Planning Commission meeting. It is really 2 lots, parcels. One's a small parcel that's getting entrance to the main parcel, about 10 acres total. They're looking to build houses. I believe the applicant, Representative Andy Husser, is from Stewardship Properties, is supposed to be on the line to answer or just give some background on the project if he's available, Mr.
I am on, Dave.
Please go ahead then. Absolutely.
Yeah, this is Andy Husser from Legacy Land Development and Stewardship Investing. As Dave mentioned, we're looking to rezone the 2 parcels there off of Lincoln Way and Noble, right behind Epworth Church, to R2 single family residential. It's currently zoned for multifamily. R2 is will conform to all the neighboring properties. Our preliminary plans would be to build single story ranch style homes in the 1,500 square foot range with attached garage, fairly energy efficient type homes there.
How many homes do you plan on getting in that area?
Plat maps would be between 25 and 30, I believe.
Ms. Littman, you have a question?
Yes, would there be any variance request of the lot size once you're putting in the 25 to 30 single family homes?
No, we would be able to, we would go off of the lot size requirements for R2.
And that is an 80-foot frontage?
Correct.
May I ask one more question?
Go ahead, Ms. Littman.
Yep.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Starrett. You have chosen the only entrance to the property to come off of the side street, Noble. Was there any thought to include a second entrance or exit to that number of homes onto Lincoln Way?
Yes, there would actually be a second entrance point. The only rezoning would be for the entrance off of Noble. The access point that we have on Lincoln Way is already zoned R2, so we would not need to rezone that parcel. But there would be two entrance points, one off of Lincoln Way, one off of Noble. I would anticipate one being used almost more as a construction entrance in the initial phase, but then become another entrance. It would essentially, what we have drawn out would be almost basically a full circle there with two access points.
Do you have a timeline when this project will begin and end?
We would start phase one as soon as the rezoning is complete. We have began surveying and we're already working on a number of construction bids and have a number of those out there. I would anticipate having the first homes, depending on how long the rezoning process takes. I would anticipate phase one being about 90 to 120 from the time of moving dirt. And I would think phase one would be approximately 5 homes.
Mr.
Go ahead, Mr. Lewis.
I don't. This is probably more suited for administration, whoever they want to answer this. As far as water runoff, road, new road construction, I'm assuming they're going to need some kind of road in there, and other infrastructure. Is there any cost to be incurred by the city?
Mr. Lewis, Dave Mealy, that's more in our engineering department. Jason Popeil is not on, but I do not believe there's any cost associated with this. I think the developer is responsible for all that.
I know that they probably have to pay a sewer connection fees and things of that nature. Is what I would
tap-ins. Yes.
That'd be the only thing I want to hear. Also, Ms. Starrett, is probably from our engineering department, especially with. I'm sorry, for the developer. You are creating. You said it would basically be a circle, so there'd be a street that you are creating inside this land area.
Yes.
So yeah, I'd want to talk to our engineering department about the rules and regulations that the developer would be beholden to in creating the street. And it's nothing about this particular developer, but as many of us can testify in the past, there have been some developers who quality of street that they have laid is less than sufficient, and we end up having to go and fix it later. So I just want to make sure we're looking at our best interest.
Well, Mr. Lewis, I can tell you this, that we have kept everything up to code with regards to developments since I've been here with regards to regulations, and I agree with what you're saying, but I think what we're doing now is pretty much everybody's required to do certain things, and if they're not doing them, they won't be permitted to do them.
And have we had any word or heard any word from the citizens that live in the area that would possibly object to this?
Mr. Lewis, go ahead, Mr. Husser.
Yeah,
no, go ahead, Mr. Husser.
I've personally walked most of the neighborhood and knocked on doors to get signatures for the petition, and it's been very favorable. We haven't really had much resistance at all. I think going from multifamily to single family, by and large, has been a positive for the neighborhood. Where I think there were some concerns to multifamily, but going to single family, it seems to be more of a positive than a negative to the neighborhood.
And Mr. Lewis, the neighbors will get a chance to voice their concerns if they have any at the Planning Commission. I know the notices, I think, went out last Wednesday for the meeting coming up, not this Wednesday, but following Wednesday.
And do we have a estimation as to what market value of these properties would be?
We would anticipate these homes to be in the 170 to 190 range.
Thank you.
Ms. Littman?
May I ask who the prior owner was? Was it Epworth Church that owned this property that sold it to Legacy Land Development?
It was not Epworth Church. It was I can't think of the previous owner name. It was purchased through a Kiko auction, which had been, I guess, it had been canceled, and we purchased it directly from a sale through Kiko. But
okay, thank you. It was not Epworth. Okay, I thought it was originally the churches. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from council members at this time? If we could just have Mr. Popeil here at the next work session so we can bounce those questions that Mr. Lewis had off of him. This will obviously have to go a full 3 readings and probably longer because we'll have to have a public hearing on this at some point, I'm assuming. So any other questions on this? I give my verbal on this one.
I give my verbal. Lewis?
Thank you for your comments tonight, sir. And I have one other new piece. Thank you. I have one other new piece of legislation tonight. This is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into agreement with the Stark Regional Planning Commission for the Massillon Housing Department. Anybody want to speak on this from administration tonight?
Yes, this is Samantha Walters, and this agreement is with Stark County Regional Planning for our housing services. What they do is they come in and write up specifications for the home-funded programs that we do, the down payment assistance and full rehabilitation programs. So this will be our 5th year of this agreement with no price increase. So it is $15,000 for 2021 again. And this is, again, in partnership with regional planning, and they have their inspectors there that come in. They also do environmental and historical reviews for the home projects. So it's a great partnership between RPC and the City of Massillon.
Any other questions for Ms. Walters on this piece of legislation? Okay, I give my verbal on this piece.
I give my verbal.
And a question for Samantha. You have a reason for emergency language, but you don't have it marked on the legislative request. Is this considered to be an emergency?
Yes, it is. I apologize.
That's okay.
Yeah, it looks like this agreement needs to be starting on January 1st, 2021. So I would be in favor of the emergency language as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also have two pieces of old legislation. Those are just the two economic development grants with Lepley and Company and the Legacy Project. Those are up for third reading and vote at the next regular meeting. Any further question and comment about those pieces? Okay.
I just say that we have a finance piece that corresponds with that and they will follow along.
Okay. That's all I have in community development.
Environmental?
Nothing from environmental.
Health and welfare? There was no new legislation. Do any of the members of that committee have anything they would want to say?
I have on my calendar that we're okay to talk about animal control during this committee meeting since we didn't have the work session, since we didn't have the committee meeting. Would you prefer to do that now or at the end?
Whenever you'd like, Mr. King. It's up to you and the other committee member, really.
Mark, are you okay with now?
I whatever's easiest, whatever Mr. Lewis feels is best for the meeting.
Mr. Lewis, is that all right with you if we do it now?
Yep, floor is your guys.
All right, thank you. We've been talking about animal control all year, as you know. We've even talked about it in prior years. The subject has been covered in several Massillon Independent articles, and we were all questioned about it at our candidates forums last year. We've heard from our residents for a long time about these issues and the dangers that feral cats and stray dogs pose in our community. Councilwoman Littman had held several police and fire committee meetings on this topic this year. I appreciate her desire and efforts to keep this matter in the forefront of our legislative discussions. Tonight, I'd like to engage City Council in a discussion regarding an alternative to the police department position as it has historically been. I agree with what the mayor said a few weeks ago, that our police department is busy and they have more important things to deal with at this time. I would propose that we address animal control through either a full-time or part-time administrative position, similar to our existing code enforcement officers. I believe that a position like this would have the same authority and responsibilities as Vicki Davis had when she held the position. This person would complement and work collaboratively with our police department, law department, and the county dog warden, but could serve as our community liaison in terms of animal education, enforcement of applicable animal code sections, and could take over the neighbor-initiated trap, neuter, and return program that the residents in the 5th Ward started a month or so ago and that the Independent highlighted a few weeks ago. To my knowledge, these neighbors trapped and returned approximately 20 cats, which they paid for themselves. We should not expect the citizens, however, to sustain that effort because it is essentially a function of government. As council members, we hear the complaints of our residents and they expect us to do something about it. I have heard those complaints throughout the city, and I know most of you have as well. Our responsibility in this matter is to fund a position that can address our city's animal control needs. I understand why we eliminated the position several years ago. However, our financial picture has improved. I think now is the time that we look at this position again, maybe through a different lens. We're going to be asked these same questions, what we did on this matter next year when we all have to campaign for our existing seats. And I'd like to be able to say that we did everything we could to address their concerns. I'd like to hear what other members of the Health and Welfare Committee say. I'd like to hear what the members of council say. I'd also like to ask Mr. Richard, if he's still on the line, if he sees any impediments or issues with addressing this matter through a quote unquote civilian or administrative position first, if he's on the line still.
I am. Thank you. Committee person Hernking. There is no impediment. I mean, certainly what you're suggesting already butts some of the work that our code enforcement does. I know Jimmy Johnson in particular has brought several cases to our office that borderline on harboring nuisance animals, and at which point those nuisance animals become a health risk and also a code violation for the neighborhood in which that person is doing those activities. So quite honestly, it does cotton to a portion of what a code enforcement officer does, and what you're suggesting, I suppose, is a person that would really solely concentrate on those types of cases. And it seems like there's certainly enough for a part-time, if not full-time at this time, at least my knowledge of the complaints that I get through my office. So I see no legal implement at all. It certainly it makes more sense. Unfortunately, over the past 10 or 20 years, police have been dealing with nuisance animals and mental health issues when they were not necessarily formally trained to do that in the academy, because those historically were not their problems, but because of lack of funding or lack of mental health programs, they've taken it upon themselves to do that, and then nuisance animals as well. So I think it is an outside the box approach to what does appear to be a problem for the citizens of Massillon.
Mark, as a member of the committee, is there anything you'd care to mention, or do you have anything? What are your thoughts on this?
Thank you, Mr. Hernking. I'm completely in favor of something like this. I believe centralizing this into one person helps us to, number one, it helps that person to establish relationships with the Stark County Dog Warden, Stark County Sheriff's Department, Stark County Humane Society, Stark Parks Wildlife Center, as well as with some of the nonprofit organizations that are doing trap, neuter, and return for feral cat colonies. When we have one person and they have a relationship established with these organizations, they make a call, it gets taken care of immediately. So far, what I have seen in Ward 1, when I've had animal complaints, particularly dog complaints, nothing's getting done until 5 or 6 calls are being made. And 1 or 2 of those calls have to be made by myself. And as a matter of fact, 2 of the complaints that I had, nobody was listening to anybody until the mayor stepped in. And the mayor shouldn't have to be called in for a barking dog to get it, to get it resolved. I've spoken with several police officers who want nothing to do with animal control. And so they're not going to, I mean, if you don't want to do part of your job, you're probably not going to do it, or you're not going to do it well. I believe this position would eliminate those problems that we've been experiencing throughout the city. And you just listen to the citizens. They want somebody who is in charge of animal control. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Lombardi. I guess, are there any other comments or feedback, thoughts from other council members?
Mr. Hernking?
Yes, sir.
I would say I am intrigued by the idea, and I like it. I like the idea that it frees our officers up. I like the idea of having a point person. I think they would be beneficial, like Mr. Lombardi said, not only in establishing relationships with different organizations, but also something as simple as licensing fees. You know, you come across the situation, we have someone that would actually be able to work with that citizen to make sure that they have their pet properly licensed, which is also just as important. And I think also it lends a little bit more of an air of support as compared to compliance. Where this person could maybe support a person and say, hey, this is the steps you should be taking. These are the organizations you can work with to make sure that you're getting what you need. Because, you know, some of these animals, maybe the family or the household just needs some support to get pointed in the right direction. And a position such as this may do that. And I find that when you come in a supportive role as compared to a compliance role, you usually get a better response. So I'm very warm to this idea. I would like to see maybe a little bit more developed on it. I don't know if maybe you and Mr. Lombardi would be willing to kind of work some slight details out and then work with administration to see how that would fit in with their current hierarchy and whatnot. And then council can take a closer look at it at that time.
Good points about the working with people. And I didn't think about the fees, but there is probably a revenue generating aspect to that. So I appreciate that.
Mr.
I don't
Hernkane?
know, excuse me, Mrs. Littman. I don't know that we'd be able to work together on this, however, Mr. Lewis, without doing it in public meetings. We're both on the same committee.
I mean, we can hear from the law director, but if Mr. Hernkane wanted to draft up his thoughts and then present it to you in a committee meeting, and then you respond with your thoughts.
I think that's the only way we can do that legally. I mean, if Mr. Richard has something different to say, by all means, I'd like to hear it.
And quite honestly, you guys also schedule a meeting at any time that you wanted to discuss this and make it publicly aware. It doesn't have to be Monday at 5. You could say, hey, you know what, this Wednesday at 2 p.m., the two of us are meeting. This is how we're doing. It's open to the public.
Okay.
Mr. Hernkane, this is Linda Littman.
Hi, Linda.
Hello. I do have a couple of questions. First of all, I had numerous conversations with Vicki, and she's provided me with a lot of helpful information. You referred to her in your prior comments. What I would like to suggest to you is, if you'd like to have a conversation with her, I also have some of her notes and documents that she had that I'd be happy to provide to you. Second item would be, I guess I was thinking of cost associated with this type of position, because Vicki did have a vehicle of her own that allowed her to transport some of these vehicles, and it may not have been to the dog warden, it may have been to their owners, it might have been to the police station, but there was some cost involved with having a vehicle, as well as her own training and equipment. Now, she paid for, according to her own comments, she's paid for a lot of that herself, but she does have budgets as part of her documents that, again, they're a little dated, but they at least give you an idea if you're referring to that type of an individual just under the administrative arm. It might give you some insight on the ancillary items that she needed to accomplish her tasks.
I certainly appreciate that, Mrs. Littman. Any contact information or anything you have, I would certainly welcome. I appreciate that.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Thoughts from anyone else?
Yeah, this is Jim Therrett.
Go ahead.
A couple things I would ask also, if Ms. Davis had items that were procured through the city funds, that we still have those available as a startup. And I know we've been getting quite a few calls and witnessed a lot of feral cats in our ward, and I'd like to see some kind of program that the city would support that, because well, we don't really need to have these cats roaming the streets all the time, and the damage that they cause. The other thing is, I noticed that every once in a while there's some skunks in the area. I don't think the police or the sheriff's department really want to address that. So having a code enforcement person that has some training in some of these other animals too, the exotic animals or wild animals, whatever you want to call them. Would definitely be what we've been talking about, hinting about for the last year, better. I know it was brought up before I was on council. So I love to see some movement on this, and I think we're heading in the right direction. Now we need to keep moving. Thank you.
It's my understanding that the cost that when the residents started their TNR program, when they set up the fund at the Alter Clinic Animal Care on Fulton, it was $35 a cat to get it spayed or neutered, I think rabies vaccinated, and then returned to its colony, its population, where the natural course of things takes place. They just don't repopulate. So, a part-time position that does not affect our police department. If I will, talk to Safety Service Director Sylvester at some point in the future and get their thoughts on this. But when it comes to cost, you're looking at a part-time person, whatever the hours may be. Vehicle is important, a lease on a vehicle, some equipment if we don't already have it. But for $35 a cat, $500 or $1,000 can go a long way to addressing that particular problem. So I appreciate your thoughts, Mr. Theriot.
Mr. Hernkane?
Yes, sir.
Again, there are programs, there are nonprofit organizations, several of them in the area that do TNR on a donation basis. So it might not even be a cost to the city to get some of these feral colonies under control. People just donate to these nonprofit organizations. What they do is they ask you to sponsor, one or two or however many cats, are part of a colony. They go out and they study the colonies. They figure out how many cats are in a colony, how much money it's going to take to TNR the colony. It's $35, like you said, for the spay and neuter at Alder Clinic, and then the cats return. These nonprofit organizations do this on their own volition. They don't get paid for what they're doing other than the cost of the spay and neuter. They have their own traps. They have their own staffs that go out and they'll trap 2 or 3 cats at a time, take them back, get them fixed, and then release them back into the colony. It takes about 3 to 5 years for the feral colony to either die out or move on. However, the colony does start to reduce almost immediately because they're not able to reproduce. A cat can get pregnant every 62 days, and a cat can have anywhere from 2 to 7 kittens. And when you're looking at a feral colony of 25, even if you say there's only 10 females in there, you're looking at a quick reproduction of a feral colony.
And I mentioned the Alter Clinic because that's where the residents in Ward 5 started their fund. We can approach the Massillon Animal Hospital and keep it right here in Massillon and keep it local. But there's also grants. In the research I've done, there's also grant opportunities for equipment and things like that for this area. So I think there's a lot of things to consider. But appreciate your comment, Mark.
Mr. Herkey.
Yes, sir.
We could also, I don't know, this might be outside of the box, but it's at least worth looking into. If they're operating in particular neighborhoods, could we potentially add one of those nonprofits to the CDBG nonprofit list? I mean, $1,000 or $2,000 out of that is not a whole lot of money for that overall budget, but it would go a long way for that nonprofit to target. Now, that would only target our CDBG neighborhoods, but I'm willing to bet there's a correlation.
Well, there is, and I've looked into this as well, and it's similar to how we do demolitions in the city. I mean, the CDBG program has 3 national objectives: the low to moderate income person benefit, eliminating slums and blight, and the urgent need, which usually comes around every 10 or 12 years when something like a pandemic hits. So 70% of our funds are spent to the benefit of low to moderate income individuals, whether they be on an area basis or an income basis. But that's eliminating slum and blight category is where we conduct demolition activities predominantly our code. That's how we were able to fund code enforcement through CDBG over the years. So I think that can be certainly extrapolated to the nuisance and blighting effect of stray dogs and feral cats on our communities, on our neighborhoods within the city, and maybe not even just so much on that objective in the low to moderate income areas. So I think that could probably be used citywide as long as it's attempting to eliminate the presence of blighting influences, just like we would a demolition. We don't just tear houses down in the low to mod areas, right? So that's another good point. I think there's a lot of opportunities here to put a whole bunch of things together, and it's why I wanted to discuss it with council, and I appreciate you giving me the time this evening to do so, because I think this is a collaborative effort. We want to talk to the administration about their thoughts in this as well, because this is a city government issue, and I'm not just beating the drum on myself here. I think I'm just talking about it, but I think we can work together to really put this to rest once and for all. So, thank you. Appreciate the time here tonight. And if there's any other comments
I would like to make a comment, Mr. Hurricane.
Yes. Thank you, Joe.
I'm not opposed to looking at this position. I think it's a great idea to have it fall under code enforcement. Looking back at emails, documents, pictures from residents dating back to 2016. So, since I've been on council, so this has been an ongoing issue for 4 years that I've been partaking in. I feel that it would be in our best interest to start out in a part-time position. Looking back the last 12 or 18 months, there's been part-time positions, and then over time, the need for those positions to go to full-time. So I would be in favor of digging deep in this and considering a part-time position, so we could evaluate the need, evaluate the workload, and then proceed as needed. So I think it's a great idea. I would be in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Creamer. I appreciate those comments as well. Is there anyone else? All right, Mr. Lewis, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thank you for the time.
No problem. Thank you. Parks and Rec.
I have nothing for Parks and Recs. Thank you.
Police and Fire.
I have nothing for police and fire this evening.
Public Utilities.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I do have one item. One request was submitted by Safety Service Director Barb Sylvester, and it is for an aggregation program for the city to enter into with Energy Harbor. This would be an opt-out program as determined by the vote back in November 3rd, 2009, and resolution passed by Council 2009. I believe Mrs. Sylvester is on, if anybody has any questions or discussion. Okay, I do plan on bringing this forward for a vote on our next council meeting. I give my verbal approval for this. This does also have emergency language due to the time constraint we have to get the contract submitted. Mrs. Littman?
Sorry, Mr. Lombardi, I dropped my paper. I just had one question. We have a renewal pricing of 4.89 cents per kilowatt hour, but I don't see where what price we are coming from in our current contract to that price. Would Ms. Sylvester be able to share that with us?
Yes, I can share that with you. Our current price right now is 4.96 cents per kilowatt. So we did actually obtain a reduced rate.
So this price would then continue for the full 4-year period until 2025 in this consortium or aggregation?
Yes, that's correct.
I would give my verbal as well, Mark.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
All right.
I'm
Rules and
sorry,
courts.
I need a verbal from Jim Ferret, who is also on the Public Utilities Committee.
You have my verbal too.
Thank you.
Rules and courts.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I have nothing new for rules and courts. As we were discussing earlier this evening, we're talking about some changes to some rules of council. I think I would suggest that we do as we did tonight and maybe set up some time prior to the next work session to discuss that further. I see Mrs. Littman has her hand up. Ms. Littman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gregg. The question that I was going to ask previously was just, do we have any other submissions for adjustment to council rules? We were discussing Rule 18 in our prior prior committee meeting, but I am wondering if there are any other rules that council members have submitted to you for edit or clarification. And if so, I guess I would too like to have that prior to your next committee meeting. Not sure why it didn't come through email currently, but if we could try to get those out to us, just so that we have an opportunity to review them prior to your committee meeting.
Yes, I'm not aware of any additional, nothing else has been presented to me as far as any additional changes to any rules. Mr. Hernkane?
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. I did email Mr. Bartos a couple weeks, maybe a week or so ago, maybe a little more, to ask him to take a look at the rule governing non-committee legislation. There was a part in there that it like skipped a week for whatever reason, and he did say he would take a look at it and tighten up. I can follow up with him and see if he's looked into that matter as well, but I know that I did make that request to him to see if he would look at that one as well.
Okay, well, that has not been presented to me, so, and I know Mr. Bartos is not on the call this evening, but if Mr. Richard is still on, if he could forward that information or that request to Mr. Bartos, and he can include that with whatever revisions he has for Rule 18, if there are any additional based upon our discussion earlier to me, and then I will make sure it's forwarded on to, I guess I'll just send it out to the entire all members of council. Other than that, any further questions, concerns? Mr. Lewis, go ahead.
I'll just add that, you know, Mr. Hernkane points out that he wants to have looked at, but that doesn't preclude us from being able to move forward with what was discussed tonight. Those are separate issues. So you could move forward with what was going on tonight and look at what Mr. Hernkane's working on. They don't have to happen at the same time. They can be separate pieces of legislation and happen at different times.
Right, and I fully anticipate they will be separate and will be handled separately. But I think sounds like from what we discussed earlier and kind of ran out of time on, we've got some further discussion on Rule 18. So I would like to do that, and then in addition to that, hopefully we can finish that up in the next meeting, and then if there's any additional rule changes or revisions to consider, we can do that as well. So I would propose to members of the Rules and Courts Committee that we meet again, set a time at 6 o'clock prior to the next work session. I'm not sure off the top of my head what that date would be, but Diane, what would that date be for next?
For our next work session?
Yes.
December 14th.
Okay, so can we set up a time, 6 o'clock, as a Rules and Courts meeting at 6 o'clock on the 14th?
Yes, sir.
And you'll take care of getting out the invitation and so forth.
Yes, sir. And inform the press.
Thank you very much. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Streets and highways.
Nothing this evening, thanks.
Mr. Tharrett,
Yes, go ahead.
this is Linda Littman. I'd like to maybe bring up some changes that have occurred in our Lincoln Way 23rd Street intersection out here on the west side. I know that we'd had a brief conversation with Safety Service Director and our engineer on why those changes were made, but I continue to get numerous residents calling, asking why we have included the Gross Werner arrow or turn arrow into that pattern adjustment. So I'd like if perhaps we could have Mr. Popeil and or Safety Service Director explain that a little more clearly to us, so that, my residents out here in the 6th Ward, they pretty much have called every single day asking why that was a change made with our 23rd Street intersection change. We all know why the 23rd Street and Lincoln Way intersection change was made, because of the number of accidents that had occurred in the last 12 months. It was warranted to do so, but it was not clear or not made clear as to why the change at Gross Werner was part of that. So I would ask that maybe if you could address that either with the engineer and or the Safety Service Director, and maybe get back to us as to why that is the case, or do we have some options to change that? And that, again, that's coming to me from residents. That's why I'm coming to you.
Is there anyone on city administration tonight that could address that?
Barb, would you address
Yes.
these things?
I'm sorry. Yes, I can address that. I guess, Ms. Littman, you've seen the layout and the study that was performed. There really are no other options. Basically, we did that safety study because of the number of accidents, and worked with Jason Popeil and, again, the ODOT teams and so forth. So there really are not any other options there. That's really the traffic pattern that had to be set up for the safety because of how many accidents were at that intersection. So I'm not sure, I guess, what their questions are. If you want to refer those residents to call my office, they're more than welcome to give us a call. So I guess I'm not really sure what their questions are that you're not able to answer for them.
Well, the question is that when, and actually I have actually been sitting in the parking lot watching residents go straight through that arrow. And I know that there has to be some responsibility to the driver. And I think that we have appropriately put the arrows, et cetera, that needed to be based on the survey that was done, the assessment that was done for the intersection at 23rd and Lincoln Way. What fear I have is that I see numerous people going through, and I'm not the only one, but I have sat there and watched. I see numerous people going straight through that arrow into the area where now we are supposed to veer off to the right. So I guess these are concerns because I'm fearful that we're going to be creating accidents at Gross Werner's now as well. So again, I guess I have referred, in fact, a gentleman today to your office to try to get even a further explanation than what I can give them. But I also am sitting there in the parking lot watching people drive straight through that turn arrow, and I'm fearful again that there's going to be another area there that's going to create numerous accidents. So I guess I'm wondering, is there anything that we can do?
Mr. Therrett?
Oh, there she is. She came back.
I'm not.
Yeah, I can go back and take a look at it myself, but Sylvester already said that this is what the recommendations and of the safety survey and everything else that went through there and was approved by ODOT. So,
and the person, and if I might, Mrs. Letman, the persons that you're observing that are driving through there, they're not following the traffic pattern then. The notifications are put up, the arrows are painted there.
That's exactly right. There has to be some responsibility to the driver to look at the change that's around them. I agree wholeheartedly that we have provided enough advance notice to that. We've got the appropriate signage to the change. I'm in complete agreement with that, as well as knowing that the assessment did warrant the pattern change at 23rd and Lincoln Way. My fear is that I'm continuing to watch people go directly through that arrow, causing more accidents. So I have certainly sent people down to your office or given them your number to call for a further explanation. But I guess I just wanted to bring it up again that there is some concern about that area and the people are going straight through that turn arrow lane.
Yes, that probably would be good if you refer them to our office, that would be good. We did put up the proper signage, as I said. I can check with the engineers and see if there is any additional signage that possibly could help.
Thank you, Mrs. Sylvester.
You're welcome.
Mr. Therrett?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to make sure you didn't have anything else.
No, that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Finance. All right, the first piece for finance that we have is please prepare an ordinance to appropriate from the unappropriated balance of the local coronavirus relief fund, $13,383.49. So I spoke with the auditor this afternoon. This is money that the state is sending us, just like they've sent us the other dollars for corona relief. It is money that the state received back from communities that did not necessarily spend their whole allotment, and then they redistributed to communities that did spend their allotment. So this is an additional amount. It does have till the end of the year to be spent. So they did ask that we move quickly on it so that they can go ahead and get it appropriated and utilized. Are there any questions? I give my verbal.
Mike Gregg, I give my verbal.
Thank you.
Please prepare legislation to unappropriate from the unappropriated balance of the Safety Forces Improvement Fund, number 1205, $20,000 to the Safety Forces Improvement Fund. This is coming from the court. It's to pay for the alcohol treatment for indigent defendants through December 31st, 2020. This is all money that they, raise through the courts themselves, and they do this to make sure that they are able to cover costs for drivers who require alcohol treatment or drug rehab type treatment, but may not have the funds to be able to do so. Any questions? I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Please prepare legislation unappropriate from the unappropriated balance of the TIF Service Payment Fund to the following account: $5,589.64 developer TIFs. Appropriation is needed to pay TIF revenue received from the real estate tax to LRC Meadows in the year 2020. Madam Mayor, who do you have that would be able to speak to this? Or would this be the auditor?
Either David Maley or the auditor can speak to that.
Mr. List, this is David. I would suggest that Debbie Bonk be the one to talk about this issue.
Do we have a representative from the auditor's office here? I think we lost them. All right, I'll go ahead and get my verbal, but we'll make sure we have them at the next meeting to give us further discussion.
Stare at verbal.
Verbal from Mike Gregg.
Thank you.
Please prepare an ordinance to reduce appropriations in the tax increment fund in the following accounts: $3,889.99 in fees. This is a legislative request to be considered emergency, and the appropriation is needed because the revenue needs to be reduced to balance the budget. This is a typical end of the year thing where we're starting to zero out all our line items so that they have nice balances at the end according to our accounting practices. Any questions? I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Please prepare an ordinance to reduce appropriations in the Economic Development Fund in the following accounts: service and contracts, $70,268.00. Again, it needs to be reduced in order to balance the budget for the end of the year. I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Please prepare an ordinance authorizing the auditor to pay various 2020 bills that have been received and that will be received by her office between January 1 of 2021 and March 31st, 2021, out of the 21 appropriations within the various departments of the City of Massillon. We pass this at the end of every year, and what it is saying is that bills that were generated during 2020, but we do not receive invoices until the beginning of 21, it is allowing the auditor to pay those bills out of 2021's budget. Are there any questions or discussion this evening? I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Please prepare legislation as follows: an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Massillon to Ohio to enter into a participation agreement with Ohio Ask Me Care Plan for dental and vision insurance coverage for city employees for calendar years 2021, 22, and 23. There are no changes to the existing contract that expires at the end of 2020. All pricing terms and conditions remain the same. Ms. Sylvester,
Yes, sir.
is there anything else you would like to add to this?
No, I think it's all pretty self-explanatory there. This is the vision and dental for all of the city employees, and there was no increase in the rate, as you've seen there. So we were very happy and pleased with that, and it will continue then for the next 3 years.
Are there any questions or discussion from members of council? I provide my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Please prepare legislation to make certain transfers. I need glasses these days. I just am being stubborn. Certain stat transfers from the 2020 appropriations within the street department fund for the year end. Hospital eye dental reduced by, I believe this is the 1,300, correct, Ms. Rowland?
Yes, that is correct.
So this is the corrected piece that we had. It's 1,300 and placing it into refunds for income tax. And it's to pay income tax refunds. Any question or discussion? I give my verbal.
Stare at
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Please prepare legislation to make certain transfers within the 2020 appropriations within the Parks and Recreation Fund for the year ending December 31st, 2020. SD revenue sharing. Now, Ms. Rowland, in speaking with the auditor today, I believe she had said this one is also supposed to be 1,300, not 1,800.
Okay.
So let's verify that with her.
Yes, I will tomorrow. Well, Thursday.
All right. And it's going into income tax refunds in order to pay for the refunds. I give my verbal.
Is Lori still on the line?
Lori Katagides, Boron, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am still on the line, and when I made this legislation up before I went on vacation, the amount was $1,800, but I'd be more than happy to call the auditors tomorrow and check if there's been a conversation since then. So I will call Diane tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
Give her an update.
Thank you.
Well, based off the conversation I had with the auditor, I believe she had stated that it should be 1,300. So I will give my verbal at the 1,300. If it's meant to be 1,800, can you please call me back and I'll have to give you my verbal over the phone with that?
Okay.
That way we're all in the clear and there's no,
Alrighty.
I'll also give my verbal, Megan Starrett.
Okay.
Verbal from Mike Gregg.
Thank you.
All right. Let me get down here to these transfers I have. And then I have old business. All right, so a transfer, auditor's office, reducing county collection fees by $12,142.65, placing funds into school district TIFs and developer TIFs. This is to realign the budget to pay the TIF revenue received from the real estate tax to Massillon and Perry school districts and LRC Meadows for budget year 2020. Any questions? I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Transfer in the law department. Salary law director staff reduced by $640 and placing it into salary for law director. This is to realign the 2020 budget to have sufficient funds for salaries. I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Another one in law department, service and contracts reduction by $6,500, placing into supplies, materials, and postage. Transfer fund needs to cover supplies. Any questions? I provide my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Another one for law department, reduce travel, seminar, schooling by $250, placing into professional dues. And this is transfer funds need to cover professional dues. I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Mike Gregg, verbal.
Thank you.
Engineering, reduction in travel, school, and seminar by $5,350, placing it into service and contracts. And this is to realign the budget to pay for additional services and contracts. Do we know what additional service and contracts we're paying for? Anyone from the administration?
This is Lori. They did not have the travel this year because of COVID, and we were able to add a few additional projects that Greg has talked about along the way with everyone. So this is in case we have some added expenses to those to cover all those, and to so that we can realign the budget for 2020. I don't have specifics as to the additional projects per se, but I do know there are some in the works right now.
You. I give my verbal.
Starrett, verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
Health Department, reduction in health and travel by $1,700, placing it into rent for their facility. And this is so that they can make January's rent payment and avoid any fees. I give my verbal.
Starrett, verbal.
Mike, Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
Income tax, reduction of supplies and materials by $6,000, reduction in SD revenue sharing by $2,100, reduction in service and contracts by $1,000, placing the in total $9,100 in refunds income tax. And it's to realign the 2020 budget to have sufficient funds for expenses related to income tax refunds. I give my verbal.
Starrett, verbal.
Mike, Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
Parks and Recs, Legends F&B supply reduction of $5,000, placing it into Legends supply, and it just says to align for 2020 budget. Lori, do you know anything more about that?
Unfortunately, I do not.
Given it's $5,000, it might seem minor, but I would like to know a little bit more. Members of finance, do you have a preference on how to proceed?
Maybe we can hold off on it just for a bit, Mr. Lewis, and see if we can get an answer, and we can approve it by verbal approval at any time if we need to.
Hey, Diane, can we just, I don't know, maybe put this on unfinished business on the agenda? Are we able to do that? It's unfinished business. That way we get a reminder to inquire and get this taken care of.
Okay. Or I can call Pedro tomorrow. Oh no,
Yeah,
tomorrow.
that too, but we'd have to publicly explain what it's for since we questioned it.
Okay. So I guess we can put it under new and miscellaneous on number 6.
Yeah, we put it there or unfinished business, or trying to think where else we could possibly put it. I mean, we can put it almost anywhere. We could also call it a reports of committees from finance.
Or we could just hold it because we have another one here on hold. And I think that's the one for the economic development.
All right, yeah, let's not get fancy. Let's just hold it. We'll
Okay.
take care of it in 2 weeks.
Okay.
I'm trying to get a little bit too fancy, I guess.
Mhm.
All right, the next one, economic development, hospital, eye, dental, and life reduction by 800, putting it into school district revenue sharing to realign the budget to pay school district revenue sharing tax due and payable for fiscal year 2020. I give my verbal.
Starrett, verbal.
Mike, Greg, verbal.
Thank you.
Fire department service and contracts reduction by 4,500, placing into supplies and materials to purchase additional station ambulance fogging materials due to COVID-19 uptick in response. I give my verbal.
Starrett, verbal.
Greg, verbal. Sorry.
Thank you.
Fire department EMS billing reduction by 4,000, placing the supplies and materials to make final supplies purchases and reimburse cover all purchases reimbursed by the grant of 2020. I give my verbal.
Stare at verbal.
Greg, verbal.
Thank
All
you.
right. In old business, we had ordinance number 122-2020, which is making certain appropriations from the unappropriated balance of the 1201 Municipal Court Special Court Fund for the year ending December 31st, 2020, and declaring an emergency. I did speak with Judge Elam. He had stated that this was related to the improvement of new trench drains at the PD. They use a lot of community service hours down there for cleaning of vehicles and other things. So these drains will help with that water runoff associated with that. The funds that he is using are generated through fees and costs that that the court has from its defendants or whoever comes to the court. Additionally, they're looking at a computer to be able to read the black boxes in cars, which will help them collect more data and assist the Massillon Police Department. So I just wanted to get that additional information out there for you guys. If you have additional questions, feel free to let me know. I can try to inquire more if need be. Other than that, we had two of the other pieces, 117 and 118, that received second reading. One of them is just following along with economic development or community development, and the other one is the appropriations. Which reminds me, Ms. Katagides-Born.
Yes.
I don't think we've seen the split yet, and we're getting awfully close to the end of the year. You know what I mean?
The revenue split are you speaking of?
Yeah, that says how much goes into capital improvement and how much goes into general fund. And then we usually also have one from Parks and Rec as well. It's usually like 2 or 3 different ordinances.
Oh, I will double check on that for you, Mr. Lewis. I know that it stays the same, but I will check on any type of legislation that needs to go through for it.
Yeah, because we need all those in to be passed by the 21st.
I do not recall those from years past, but I will check for you. I will let you know.
All right, thank you. And that is all for finance.
Ed?
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
This is Lori. I did reach out to Steve Pedro on that $5,000, and he is saying that is for year-end food and beverage for the Legends.
Okay, to cover the cost of purchasing food and beverage for the end of the year?
Yes.
All right, I'll give my verbal on that one, Diane.
Okay.
I will as well. Megan, Sarah.
Verbal from Mike Gregg also.
And Council Pro Tem, I'd also like to remind you that there will be ordinance number 11-2020 on the OHM engineering contract, which is under the call of the calendar for 12/7.
Thank you. And yes, thank you. Anything else? All right, well, this would come to the point in time in the meeting where we will be open to public comment. If there's any citizens online tonight that would like to address City Council, then now will be your opportunity to do so. We do ask that you please state your name and address, and please try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. If you'd like to comment, now is the time to do so. Hearing none, I guess this would conclude the committee meetings of Massillon City Council. See you all next week.